this border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
5 receivers at Duncan's disposal. Duncan stepping up. Hit! Ball is loose!
Big call here.
Marshall thinks they have it, and the Herd do!
Here's the kickoff from Amaretto Curry to the Hilltoppers, and we are underway, and a fake reverse on the kick return. And here comes Townsend down the left sideline. What a way to start it for Western Kentucky on the road, and it is an opening touchdown return, and just like that, the Hilltoppers strike first.
Justin Rohrwasser to try to win it for Marshall from 53 yards out. It's got the leg. It is good! And the perfect season continues for Justin Rohrwasser.
Goes for 2. Going for the win. Western Kentucky going for the victory. Rolling to his right, quick strike, and they did it! Western Kentucky has ended the perfect season into the hands of Willie McNeil. A shocker here in West Virginia, and it is over for Marshall. They end the regular season 11-1.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. We had a very underwhelming game this past weekend for the Herd, Trace, but as they all say, with an ugly win, how's the saying go? A win is a win. And that's all that really matters at the end of the day, is that you get this win, which the Herd was able to do. So before we get into that, remember to follow us on Twitter at MoonshineTD and follow the podcast at MSTD_podcast. You can find the show. Please subscribe, download, and rate it. You can find the show anywhere you get a podcast, but mainly it's easiest to find on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And we also have the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast YouTube channel, which has all of our episodes on it. So please head over and subscribe to that too. So if you miss an episode and it gets deleted off of the recent episodes list, then you'll be able to find it. Trace, let's talk about homecoming in Huntington for the Herd. They brought in Old Dominion, who going into this game had never won in Huntington, hadn't won a conference game since 2018, and we should put a star beside that because, of course, they did not play the 2020 season at all. But still, they hadn't won a conference game in a long time.
Yeah.
And Marshall came into this game as a 21-point favorite, and the Herd escaped with a win 20-13 in a game they really didn't do anything for about 55, 54 minutes worth of the game. Offensively, they didn't do much. But the Herd now moves to 3-3, evens their record overall and in conference, 1-1 now in conference. So, what do you make out of this game? I know you were there. I watched on TV, and it was not, it wasn't anything that blew you away, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You get one in the left-hand column. That's all the people are going to care about at the end of the day. So, what about this game? What did you see? What I guess we could say, what concerns you the most now? Because this is a completely different Marshall team than we have seen. So, where are you at with it in your head?
There's definitely a lot of concerns right now. This was a bad game. This game was hard to watch. I mean, this was a bad performance. Besides the end, really. I mean, it was not good in any stretch of the imagination. It was not good. I mean, that's what I was saying to people I was sitting around yesterday at the game. I said, this should have been Marshall's get right kind of game. You know what I mean? After 3 straight losses, you're at home, homecoming against a pretty weak opponent. But no, it wasn't a get right game. It was a squeak it out at the end by the skin of your teeth game. And Marshall got extremely lucky to win this game because they didn't deserve to win the game. Just period. It did not. And I mean, it was ugly. I mean, the offense, 6 points through 58 minutes, 59 minutes or whatever. It's that's unacceptable against a team that's, this considered this weak and this subpar. And it just makes, I mean, it was just a bad day for the offense. Defense, they weren't great by any stretch of the imagination, but at least they only gave up 13 points. I mean, you can't really, yeah, it is Old Dominion, but like they did a decent job, given the fact that the offense was doing nothing for the majority of the game. And even when the offense had something going, they would shoot themselves in the foot and do something stupid. I mean, it's just like, it was like clockwork. I mean, until the very end, everything good that Marshall did, they followed up with something worse in magnitude every single time, the entire game. Like defensively, the interception that they ran back to the 5-yard line. He spikes the ball and it's 15 yards back, and they get nothing out of that drive. Or at least, I don't remember if they got 3, or I think they got 3, but they essentially got nothing out of that drive. And then other instances, you have a 4th down in inches. Of course, you run into your own lineman and you fall short of the first. There were so many things in this game that was just no discipline, just not smart football. I mean, that was probably the biggest takeaway for me from this game, was just how undisciplined, how dumb they played in this game. I mean, it's the 6th game of the year. At this point, you should know kind of have it figured out as far as discipline goes. And they did not in this game. So, it's an ugly win's better than a pretty loss. This counts. It's like I said, if you win the game 50-0 and you play as perfect as you can play, that's still the same result as this. So, like, it's still, but man, they're not going to beat probably anybody left on the schedule if they play that bad again. So they really better get it together, because it's not going to get any easier from here.
Yeah, what's concerning is that the lack of discipline as far as penalties go. Hurd had like 12 penalties, 105 yards. I mean, they were racking them up in the first quarter and the first half particularly. But just the undisciplined play, the lack of sharpness, I guess is what you would call it, from, a team that we saw week 1 just go in and dominate a Navy team. And now to this point, we're seeing a consistent regression of sharpness. The things that were working all of a sudden aren't working. And, the plays that were being made aren't being made right now. So it's concerning for a different number of reasons. Before we were seeing a Marshall defense that wasn't getting gashed on big plays, both on the ground and through the air. It was kind of a pick your poison. Like, you might be able to get us a couple of times a game through the air, but we're going to shut down your run game. And now we're seeing on a 3rd and 2, guys rip off a 30-yard run. And we've seen it for the last couple of weeks, and that's concerning. The schedule is not really going to get any easier. Of course, we'll preview North Texas, who the Herd has on the slate this coming weekend, and then they follow that up with FIU. And that's their last 2 opportunities to get it right before they get into the roughest portion of their schedule. November is going to be make or break time for the season for the Herd. It's going to be, will they make it to a bowl game or not? I mean, those are legitimate questions. You got 3 losses on the table right now. And if you're a 500 ball club, you eke into a bowl game right now. And if you look at the schedule and go, wow, okay, we've got North Texas, we've got FIU, we've got FAU, Charlotte, Western Kentucky, and UAB. Can we go, can we get 4 more wins? Can we get 3 more wins in that bunch of games left to get to 6? You let one of these next 2 slip away, you don't feel good about that. But look, some of the penalties, I watched the entire game. Of course, I see it from a different perspective than you did from being at the game. Some of them were kind of like, really, we're calling that, the unsportsmanlike conduct you mentioned on the Corey McCoy interception completely should not have been flagged. There was no ill intent there. The dude was jacked up about making a big play and just spiked the ball. Now, there happened to be an Old Dominion defender close, but he wasn't taunting the guy. So that was just a little, that was ticky-tack in my opinion. After a big play, you should allow a little bit of leniency for a little celebration. But let's talk about these indicators. Surprisingly, Trace, Marshall sweeps the 3 of the 4 and you get a push on turnovers. Marshall outgains Old Dominion 390 to 314, still well below their season average of offensive output. And to be honest with you, up until that last drive where they get 75 yards, They barely outgained Old Dominion. Time of possession could not really be any closer. Marshall with 30 minutes, 4 seconds to Old Dominion's 29 minutes, 56 seconds. And first downs, Marshall gets a fairly sizable edge, 24-19. Turnovers, of course, are a push, 2-2. The Herd went up 3-0, 2/3 of the way through the three-fourths of the way through the first quarter. And that was basically it. They didn't hold a lead. Old Dominion went right back down the field and scored. And they trailed in that game until there was 33 seconds left, and Willie Johnson caught the 2-yard touchdown pass from Grant Wells. I mentioned this during the game when it looked like it was a real possibility that Marshall was going to lose to Old Dominion. I mentioned that Marshall was on the verge of losing 4 straight games 4 very different ways. And that in and of itself is quite concerning. Even though they ended up winning this game, that trend is still very concerning because you lose to East Carolina after being up 17 points in the fourth quarter. Then you lose to Old Dominion on the road in a game you really should have won. You did win everywhere except for on the scoreboard. Then you lose to Middle Tennessee State by dropping the ball or putting 6 turnovers and a block punt on the board. Then you potentially would have come in here and lose this game with absolutely zero offensive identity in this game. The running game wasn't working. Rasheen Ali held out of the end zone, coming in as the nation's leader in touchdowns, completely held out of the end zone. And, but Marshall does get the win. So, you take that. That's the most important thing. But still, this is a very different team. I don't really know what to say about this Herd team. I don't know who they are. I don't think they know who they are right now. The big question, though, is, Trace, are you at this point right now a glass half full fan or a glass half empty fan with what you saw? Because on one hand, you can say, well, they got the win, and that's the most important thing. But on the other hand, you can say, yeah, but man, Old Dominion is, that game's not going to beat UAB. That game's not may not beat Western Kentucky. They can put a lot of points on the board. And you come out and can't score 20 or more than 20, Western Kentucky can sleep 20 points. They've proven that. So where do you feel like the fan base is maybe right now, or you personally? Are you glass half full right now or glass half empty?
Well, if this makes any sense at all, I'm not glass half full or glass half empty. I'm right in the middle of that. If that makes any sense at all, I can't make any sense in my head. But that's kind of where I am with it because, on one hand, you look at it as it's a win and, it's a first-year head coach and a first-year system and everything's new and everything's this and that. And, you kind of reserve the right to hold a little judgment because it's, a totally different team. But on the other hand, you're like, this team's got way too much talent to be struggling with Old Dominion and Middle Tennessee. I mean, you look at it like that, and it's like, and on that hand, you look at it like it doesn't matter how new everything is. You should be able to beat those teams fairly easily. I mean, that's just the way I see that. So, yeah, I mean, as far as the performance goes, I mean, their performances have been rough the last couple weeks, but they have to figure it out. You can't keep playing the way you're playing. I mean, if you can just start with the discipline side of things and the stupid mistakes and the penalties and that kind of thing. If you can just get rid of that, then that's a big part of the battle. That's probably at least half the battle. The other half is just execution. So I mean, they're not. The season's not over. It's not like a totally lost season, but right now they're nowhere close to being, a championship caliber team, and they had to figure out how to get back to where they were the first couple games. I mean, there's something, something's not clicking, and it better start clicking real fast because if it doesn't, they're in for a long last couple months of the year.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. And, I'm not trying to be the Debbie Downer here, but I've got to ask these questions because I feel like a lot of the fan base is asking these questions right now. You talked about this being a different team than it was last year in the first year, coaching staff and all that kind of stuff. And while I agree with that, dude, we're seeing a completely different team than we saw in week 1 and 2. Now, granted, Navy was probably trying to figure out who they are. They just kind of came out with a big win. And, anytime you're playing an FCS type team, you would hope that the talent gap is big enough that you're going to win handily. But we're seeing things trend in the opposite direction than what they should. When are we going to see a Marshall team continue to get better as the season goes along, instead of us having to say, well, they've got to get it figured out. Well, they've got to get that figured out. Well, because it seems like it's something different. For a couple of weeks, it was turnovers, and it's still turnovers to a degree, but it's not fumbles. We're seeing a lot of interceptions, and some fall on the shoulders of Grant Wells from decision making, but some don't. Some are just like the Corey Gamage fell down during his route, and the pass that went to him was picked off. So not everything is always going to be on Wells, but we're still, a turnover is a turnover. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. If you turn the ball over, then that's an opportunity for the opposition to bite you. But let's talk about some of these guys. Grant Wells, 30 of 46. And I'll be honest with you, man, it did not feel to me like he threw the ball 46 times. I was astonished when I saw that. 299 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Quarterback rating, though, Trace, 25.9. And, of course, I mentioned with those 2 interceptions, that brings Wells to 9 on the season, which is leading the nation in that category. And that's not one you want to be leading the nation in. I will say this, and I tweeted this after the game, a congratulatory tweet to him, because a lot of negative was thrown in his direction, and I saw a lot of it on the Twitter timeline. This is like real time during the game. There was a lot that was said by various fans, and at times, some of the things that I say can be probably seen as unkind as well, when in fact I'm just reporting just tweeting what I see. It's not a personal feeling or anything, but congratulations to him for showing the moxie and sticking with it, and playing until the game was literally over, instead of just giving up and being like, it ain't my day. At many points in the game, fans were clamoring for Zaban to get a shot. And honestly, if Huff would have made the move, I don't think there would have been too many people go, that's a bad move, because Grant was off. He just wasn't having a great day. He just wasn't. And, so good effort, good job for Grant Wells for sticking with it. And I said it in the tweet, he came through when his team needed him the most. And he connected on the big play with under a minute to go, and then comes right out in overtime, and bam, they get the touchdown. They win the game. So a lot of moxie from Grant Wells in this one. Hopefully this is one that he can use to build some personal confidence, to show that, hey, I don't have to play my best game and we can still get a win. This has already happened a number of times in the Grant Wells era, where he hasn't played his best game and Marshall's gotten a win. Most namely would have been last year against Appalachian State. He did not have a great game, and Marshall ended up with a top 25 victory. Rasheen Ali, 21 carries for only 77 yards. I mentioned before he did not find the end zone, so kind of an off day for Ali. Credit Old Dominion for definitely game planning to stop him and forcing Wells to beat them. And for the most of the game, that game plan worked. It's just they didn't execute it for a full 60 minutes, and Grant bit him in the end. Shadid Ahmed, 7 catches, leads the way for the Herd, 77 yards and a touchdown. Corey Gamage, 6 for 69. Willie Johnson, 3 catches, 63 yards and a touchdown. Of course, the big one at the end, 52-yarder with under a minute to go. All in all, the Herd gets 390 total yards, only 91 total yards on the ground for the team. No fumbles in this one, which is something I pounded home had to happen. I don't know if you listened to my preview for this game, since we had to do it solo. That was my only key to victory. If Marshall holds on to the ball, Marshall gets a win, and proved to be true. But still, overly too inconsistent. Trace, what about this offensive day as a whole for the Herd? I mean, I'll get your grade in depth, of course, here in a little bit, but just based on those factors, what about this day?
Yeah, it wasn't very good. I mean, it just flat out wasn't. I mean, when you're only putting up, let's see, you put up 20 points, but let's be real, they had 6 points through 58 minutes and change. or 59 or whatever it was.
Yeah, 59 and a half minutes.
59 and a half minutes. You had 6 points against Old freaking Dominion. I mean, there's no other way you can spin that. That's a bad offensive day. And the only reason that it wasn't like catastrophically bad is because they clicked in the last drive and then the overtime. And that's the only reason my grade is what it is, because quite frankly, the offense was bad for most of the game. And I know one of the people we follow on Twitter was talking to us on Twitter, and he basically said the same thing, like, talking about the grades and stuff. And it just was not a very good day. And that's shocking because even when they've lost games, before this, like the offense had done a pretty good amount of stuff. Like they had put up points and moved the ball and so forth. And they were moving the ball pretty well in this game. It's just they kept shooting themselves in the foot every time. I mean, 2 interceptions, which I'll get into more on that later. Then, like I said, like I said earlier, the 4th and inches where you're under center for a quarterback sneak, you lose your footing, run into the back of your lineman and fall down or whatever it was. And just penalties. The red zone offense was just atrocious. They just could not do anything when they got in the red zone at all. So it was a very big digression for the offense this week. I mean, I don't imagine that that's going to be the case again. Like, I don't think they're going to continue to be like that. But man, it was not very good.
Yeah, I'm gonna. This is not an excuse, but it is becoming a little bit more apparent that just how dynamic of a figure and how big of a focal point that Talik Keaton is for this offense. And not having him there is proving to be a bigger loss than we initially probably thought. He not only from a production standpoint, but from a standpoint of what he makes the defense have to account for, thus freeing up other players. So, the Herd can't get him back fast enough. But that's a big weapon to have in street clothes right now. But, man, it's something's got to get right. Let's talk about the defense now. Charlie Gray led the way for the Herd. 11 tackles, 5 solo, 1 quarterback hurry. Abraham Beauplan, Najee Johnson, and Eli Neal all with 7 tackles. Najee Johnson and Beauplan both 4 solo. Beauplan 1 sack and 1 tackle for loss. Eli Neal 3 solo, 1 sack and 1 tackle for loss. All in all, the Herd, as far as impact plays go, not too bad. 4 team sacks, 6 tackles for loss, 11 quarterback hurries. They did a pretty good job getting DJ Mack off of his spot. The problem was he's a very good quarterback, mobile quarterback. They did manage to get 2 interceptions as well. But look, I said this during the game, or I don't know if I tweeted it, but I was definitely thinking it. Old Dominion missed on a couple of long throws that were open, and they would have been bona fide touchdown plays. So they were mere inches away from putting this one out of reach fairly early in the game. I mean, if they connect on those, Old Dominion's 21-0 or 21-3 or, whatever it is throughout that game, and it's not working offensively for the Herd, there's really no pathway to victory. So luckily, the Herd was able to make just enough plays defensively to get a win here. But special shout out to Najee Johnson for having to guard that 6'8" tight end, Coons, for Old Dominion. He was billed as their big weapon in the passing game, along with Ollie Jennings, the WVU transfer. But late in the game, when Old Dominion was down trying to, seal one or get that comeback win or whatever, Johnson made 2 very big plays on Kuntz and, kind of stifled the Old Dominion drive. So it's a tall task for a safety to have to guard a 6'8" tight end, big body guy like that. So just special recognition to Najee Johnson. The stat line, even the 7 tackles, 4 solo, but the job he had to do covering that guy did not go unnoticed by me. And if it went unnoticed by Herd fans, give him a congratulatory tweet or something, because he by and large kept in check that big weapon for the Monarchs. Shane Chucci on the day, 2 for 2 on field goals, 2 for 2 on extra points. How clutch, Trace, has Chuchi been since he's retaken the kicking duties?
Pretty solid.
I mean, he's only missed the one kick, and, you know, you can't really fault him for that. It's a game where Marshall has all the turnovers. So, you know, he should have never been in that position anyway to have to be perfect. You always want him to make the kicks, but, you know, he's doing a fabulous job. Robert Lefevre, 4 punts, 156 total yards, 39-yard average, along a 48. So day for Robert in the kicking game, but it is what it is. Grades time, Trace. This is what I know you look forward to. So, what about the quarterback play against Old Dominion?
Yep, I gave Grant Wells a C+. I mean, obviously, if they wouldn't have won, and if they wouldn't have gotten the late 2 touchdowns, it would have been more like a D, or like even worse probably. But because of the finish, I gave him a C+. I mean, if you look at the numbers, like, you know, and it's kind of perplexing a little bit, because if you look at the numbers, you wouldn't think that the crowd and the fans were as mad at him as they were. I mean, you know, he got booed a lot in that game yesterday. You know, I was there. Like, there was a lot of boos at times, and, you know, he still completed 30 out of 46, which is like, you know, 65-ish%, 299 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and even the interceptions, you could almost make cases that they weren't on him, because the one, Gammons just fell down. I mean, just flat out fell down. And as he was going to make his break, he fell down, and then the linebacker or whoever picked it off. So, like, that was just because the receiver fell down. And then the other one, which was, they were trying to throw, I think, a post to Willie Johnson. I think he ran the wrong route. What Huff said in the post game. So, I mean, that one I thought was just a bad throw, but, like, Huff seems to think that it was because the route wasn't ran the right way. So, I mean, he's the coach, he would know. But QBR was 25.9. That's low. I mean, I wouldn't have expected it to end up being that low. I would have thought maybe like 50, you know, so, but 25.9 is pretty bad. He was rough in the second half a lot, I noticed. I mean, there was a point in the game where it was almost like it was in the first half against UAB last year, where he just couldn't complete a pass. It was almost to that point. It was rough. Just no chemistry, no, you know, he wasn't in sync with anybody, nothing. It was just not good. You know, missed some throws, but rallied late and made it count late when they absolutely had to have it. And yeah, it's against Old Dominion. It's not a comeback against, you know, Alabama or somebody, but still, it's a comeback. It's a win that they really need. If you lose this game, you go up to 2-4. This season's done. You're done, because you might not. I mean, you might be on a 4, 5, 6 game losing streak if you lose this one. So they had to get this one. They had to figure out a way to pull it out, and I think it's going to be big for them moving forward. But yeah, Grant Wells was an interesting game, but I gave him a C+.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I think the Boo Birds are starting to come out a little quicker because of, you know, the trend in interceptions.
Yes, 9 and 6 games is unacceptable.
I think that, you know, during the game, the broadcaster said, you know, something to the effect of, you know, every time that, you know, Wells drops back, Herd fans like hold their breath, because you're not sure what's going to happen. And I think to a certain degree, that's pretty true. You know, is it going to end up being a throw into triple coverage that may get picked off? Is it going to be one of those, you know, super fast balls to a guy that's 5 feet away that, you know, whizzes through his hands? I mean, or is it going to be a pass that's you throw behind a wide open receiver? I mean, all those things happened. All those things happened. So, you know, the concern by the fan base is, you know, merited, I would say. But all in all, he's still getting the job done. I mean, like you said before, an ugly win is better than a pretty loss. So would you rather, you know, I'm not trying to pick on Western Kentucky, but Bailey Zappi continues to put up 450, 500 yards a game, and the toppers keep coming out on the wrong end of these games. So would you rather your quarterback throw for 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, or 299, 2 touchdowns and 2 picks and get a win? Well, I think at the end of the day, you'd rather have the win over the personal accolades. but it is what it is. C+ is fair. I would tend to be in line with that. Grant played a really rough game until the 59-minute and 30-second mark. He hit some big plays, some plays missed, but at the end of the day, he did what he needed to do to get a win for this Herd, and that's all you can ask for. Offensively, go ahead.
Real quick, I was going to say, think about that big play that they had. I think it was in the first half. It would have been a 40 to 50-yard gain to Willie Johnson. Got called back.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. That's just more along the lines of them just not playing smart. And I think it's worth noting too that in the post game, Huff was emphatically behind Grant Wells.
He be.
Said he is his quarterback. He is Marshall's quarterback. Until someone beats him in practice, he's the guy.
Yeah, he should be. Your head coach can't be wishy-washy on his starting quarterback, and Huff knows that you make a decision and you stick with that decision until it's apparent, egregiously apparent, that it's the wrong decision. And we're not at that point. We're not at the point to where it's an egregiously wrong decision. Grant Wells is still the best quarterback on the roster. And always, most always, one of the most popular guys on any football team is the backup quarterback.
Right.
That's just the old adage, and it's true for a reason. So, nothing against Zaban, but if he could do everything better than Wells, he would be starting, right? Yeah. Especially in a year one head coach. Everybody's open for competition. You want the best 11 on the field, and your best 11 is currently on the field, barring any injuries. So, offensively as a whole, we mentioned 390 total yards against Old Dominion, which is well below the season average for the Herd. They did find the end zone when they needed to. But what do you got for this offense?
Yeah, I give the offense a C-. It obviously wouldn't be that high if it wasn't for the final 2 touchdowns. C- might be a little too high. It was not a very good day. Only scored the 20 points. Like I said before, only the 6 points during the entirety of the game, essentially. 14 points in the final minute, whatever, and then plus overtime. Well, all together, I don't know how long it was, but it wasn't very much time, put that way. 390 total yards, like you said. That's okay, but when you're used to putting up 550 yards, that's not going to get it done. 299 passing, only 91 yards rushing. Thought Old Dominion did a good job against the run. Rasheen Ali had to earn every yard he got in this game. He was dancing around. He had to earn every yard. So kudos to them on that. 12 penalties, which most of them were offensively. Some were on defense and special teams and so forth. But man, 12 penalties is not going to get it done. And the offense, you can't let that happen. When you get 40 or 50 yard chunk plays called back, you can't let that happen. And I'm sure there's probably more stuff I'm forgetting, but yeah, you can't have that. Third down percentage was pretty low, 5 of 15 on third downs. That's not really going to get it done. 1 of 3 on fourth down, and it was 4th and inches, and you can't. You don't even get it. You probably lost yardage. You probably end up losing a little bit on that. It's like, really, you got to be able to run a quarterback sneak better than that. And then the 2 turnovers, like you said. Even if they're not solely on Grant Wells, that's still on the offense because Gamage fell down and Willie Johnson possibly ran the wrong route. So you can't have that. That's offensive problems. So this was not a good day for the offense. Don't make no mistake. But because they got the win and because they finished strong, I'll give them a C-.
I do want to touch base on that 5 of 15 on third down. That's a killer. That's a killer. If you're a tempo offense and you aren't picking up chunk plays, you're going to find yourself in a lot of third downs just because you run a lot of plays. You have to be better on third down or else you're not really a tempo offense.
And they were all 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10 too. All of them almost were 3rd and long.
Yeah. And we continually see on a 3rd and long. Now they don't do this every time, obviously, but how many times a game do you see the Herd in a 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, and they call a 40-yard pass play? That's so low percentage.
Or a swing pass to Sheldon Evans or something.
And someone tweeted during the game that I started to agree with. Every long pass is basically just a free down for Old Dominion because they weren't hitting them. So it was like a throwaway down. So, you better start taking what the offense or what the defenses give you a little bit more instead of pressing for that 25, 30-yard hit. Why can't you just take the 8-yard hit? I mean, 8 yards a clip. What offense wouldn't take that? And 1 of 3 on 4th down. Boy, that quarterback sneak looked rough. I mean, rough. If you go back and look at it, I watched it on the replay, like in real time, the actual replay of the play. Old Dominion's defensive line basically just dove low, and they created junk and garbage and traffic, and it worked. I mean, the guys had nowhere to, the offensive line had nobody to move anywhere. So, I mean, that was just a great, that was a great strategy, and it worked. But later in the game, Marshall was faced with a similar 4th and short, and they made the right call. They changed, what they had done and gave the ball to Ali, and he picked it up. That's what you do. You got a great running back that runs hard. That dude could almost fall forward for a yard and a half. So let's learn from that one. Defensively, Trace, 314 yards held by Old Dominion. They did miss on a few big plays. It goes down as a win for the defense, but if those hit, I mean, they were inches away from big plays hitting. They did get gashed several times in key moments on a 3rd and short or or crunch time play that Old Dominion had to have. They were able to get that. So what do you got for this defense?
Yeah, I give them a B-. I mean, it was a decent day. They did some things well. Only gave up 13 points. I mean, usually when you only give up 13 points, you're in a great position to win the game, usually. And, they ended up winning. No thanks to the offense, but the defense did their part as far as holding them out of the end zone, keeping them from scoring. They gave up 314 total yards. That's okay. I mean, whatever. 106 passing, but they really weren't much of a passing team. 208 yards on the ground. I mean, Marshall's run defense is shockingly weak this year. I mean, it's just you got to call it like you see it. I mean, they're one of the worst in the country at that, and it's halfway through the season. So what else could it be? Unless they get it shored up, I don't know. Something's wrong there. But the defense did force 2 turnovers. That was and they were both in pretty crucial moments, because the one I think, if I'm not mistaken, the one was when Old Dominion was up 10 to. Oh, no, I'm sorry, they were up 10-6. No, that wasn't it. So, but anyways, they forced 2 turnovers, really good. Although the one interception that Gilmore had, he took it out of the end zone of the one.
I disagree.
What the heck are you thinking,
I disagree.
Gilmore?
I disagree. He did not take it out. He was hit out into the field of play, and they spotted him down. But whatever.
I hope so, because
whatever. They said his momentum took him out, but it is quite apparent. If you go look at it, whenever they post the highlights, our guy Dunk Media will put the highlights up in a couple of days on YouTube, and you'll be able to watch. If you watch it, you will see, he's totally going to come down in the end zone and not, and he gets hit from behind by that big tight end, puts him out of the end zone. So they spotted at the half-yard line. So I don't totally put that on Gilmore. I don't.
With how rough the game was going, I just assumed that he did just take it out. I mean, that's just how everything was trending. But yeah, I didn't. But then, I mean, the defense as well give up 9 of 18 on 3rd down. That's a little concerning that they couldn't get him off the field better than that. I mean, 50% on 18 attempts. That's you got to get them off the field more. They did get 4 sacks, which surprised me. I didn't think they had enough for 4 sacks. Like, I know they were getting to the quarterback, but it seemed like more times than not they couldn't quite get there all the way. Yeah. 6 TFLs, 11 quarterback hurries. Like I said, they were getting pressure at times. It's just they weren't getting them down, but they got him down 4 times. So pretty good there. So defense was a little up and down for sure, but ultimately, at the end of the day, they did enough to win the game and made enough plays. So give them a B-.
That's fair. They did enough. And what's the most concerning is now we've seen in back-to-back weeks them just mainly get gashed on the ground. I can handle giving up a big pass play every now and again because that's just going to happen. I can also handle a pass interference call from time to time because that's going to happen. But I can't handle getting gashed on the ground in key moments when you have the opportunity to get off the field, when it's a 3rd and 2 and you give up a 30-yard run. That is just so infuriating. It's not like the guys enjoy it happening either, but I'm just saying, when you're like, God dog it, that was our chance to get off the field, Old Dominion's running back, I can't remember his name right now, had a career high rushing yards. He went for over 150 yards. I would imagine it was Elijah Davis. I'm not 100% on that, but that's who I had in the preview. That's a player to look out for. But he had a career high, went over 150 yards, I think, the week before. I don't know if it was a career high for, was it Jaron Pierce for Middle Tennessee State? But I know he had a great game. So this is starting to be concerning now. If you can't stop the run, you can't count on getting to the quarterback 8 times in a game. You're going to have to stop the run a little bit better. And North Texas runs the ball pretty well. So we'll see how that goes, but not bad. B- is fair. The defense wasn't really put behind the 8 ball like they were against Middle Tennessee State and had and asked to, continually get stops, but they got to be a little bit more stout. Special teams. What do you got, Trace? Chuchi does what you hope he would do, and ultimately, keeps you in contention to run your offense for 58 minutes of this game. So, what do you got for the special teams?
Yeah, I gave special teams a B. It was a pretty good day. There wasn't a whole lot that stood out, but it was a pretty solid day. Like you said, Chuchi was 2 of 2 on field goals. You can't really ask for more than that. 2 of 2 on extra points. Lefevre had 39 yards per punt, which is okay. He put it this way, didn't have a bad punt, but there was a pretty bad punt return by Willie Johnson. It ended up being a -4 yard return where it's just like he just kind of went backwards and just like could not figure out how to turn it upfield at that point in time. And I was thinking, well, what the heck? And that I remember thinking that was the same play that I said that was when Old Dominion was backed up pretty far and they had to punt it now, and their punter had a rough day. And I was thinking, you know what? Marshall's going to end up with great field position here. Sure enough, he booms about a 45, 50 yarder, and Willie Johnson goes 4 yards backwards. I'm like, well, there goes my whole theory. So that wasn't good there. And then at the end, there was almost a pretty catastrophically bad penalty on that Old Dominion kick return, plus 15 on the end of that return. That was almost a big thing, because if they would have got just a few more yards on that last drive, their kicker probably has enough leg to nail that kick. So that was almost game, set, match right there. So that was a costly penalty. But special teams overall were pretty good. Nothing too bad. So I'll give them a B.
Yeah, the only other thing that I'm going to mention, other than that penalty that you said on the final kickoff, which was scary. Man, that was scary. Because I was thinking, geez, they need like 20 yards, 25 yards, and they can win this game.
Yeah, they got to get a kicker.
And that dude was close. That was a 58-yard kick, and it would have been good from 55.
Yeah.
The only other thing that really stood out to me was there was a punt return that ultimately wasn't a return. Willie let it bounce and go. But, dude, that ball bounced between 2 herd players. And I'm not sure how much room was between Willie and I don't know who the other player was. It may have been Bowers. I'm not sure. But that was too close for comfort. A football is an odd-shaped object, and it bounces in weird ways. And, man, that's fire you don't want to play with right there. That would have been catastrophic. But not bad. Special teams, good day. Chuchi's keeping the hope alive for this game. So good for him. I'm glad he's having a great year after, not being named a starter in week to start the season, but he's recaptured that job and doing well with it. Coaching. How about that, Trace? What do you got for the coaches against Old Dominion?
I gave him a C. I didn't think it was the greatest day. Obviously when you're playing that flat and you just look that bad for the majority of the game, that can't lead to a very high grade for the coaching. It's their responsibility to get the team ready to play, and they were very flat and just out of sync for the majority of the game. And there's no denying that. And plus the discipline issues that were going on were horrible problems. I mean, like I said, everything that they did good up until the very end, everything that went well for them, there was at least one thing that he almost immediately followed that just took it all away. That just set it back and, in reverse. So can't have that. The offense played, it was a pretty slow day for them, obviously. They did finish well, so you got to give them credit there. They've instilled in the players that you got to play till the end. You got to play till the old cliche, the final whistle blows. But that's what they do, and they did that against Middle Tennessee, and they nearly came back and pulled that one off. And then they did it in this one and did come back and pull it off. So they have instilled a good mindset there, never quit. Which should go without saying, but some players need to hear that. So the coaching was a little iffy, because this should have been, like I said earlier, this should have been like their get right game. It should have been like a 45-7 or whatever. You would have liked to have seen a game like that where Marshall finally starts clicking. They break the losing streak. They broke the losing streak, but not much clicked. So I've got to give the coaching a C.
Yeah. This is the double-edged sword of running a high-tempo offense, or what you want to be a high-tempo offense. Is if it's not working, you're probably not going to put a lot of points on the board. You may rack up a few yards here and there. Marshall almost gets 400 yards of offense, but the point total is not going to win you a lot of ball games. How many times have we said on this podcast the magic number is 30 points in Conference USA? And if you can't get to that, your chances of winning a ball game drop exponentially versus if you can reach that plateau or that watermark. But to me, this game was more, from a coaching standpoint, was more about having to coach them up, having to keep them chopping wood, having to keep them, engaged and not down, and just keep fighting. We can make the play. We can get a hit. We'll hit one. And as out of sorts as Marshall was on both sides of the ball for the majority of this game, they did just enough. When crunch time came, they made enough plays offensively and defensively. They finally needed to stop to get to end the game, and they got that. In overtime, they needed one more stop on fourth down, and they got that. And I'll be lying to you if I didn't think that, these Conference USA officials weren't going to throw a flag just to throw a damn flag on a 4th and goal in overtime. If that game's in Norfolk, they probably do. And I don't care if people roll their eyes at that, but that's just how these officials all game long were quick to throw their flag out. It's not like this was a low penalized game. I mean, there were a lot of penalties on both teams in this game. So to have a tight coverage play on a 4th down in overtime for touchdown, I mean, I was a little surprised that they let them play, but they did. And the Herd got the stops they needed. So decent job by the Herd coaching staff. That's what I'll say. Decent job. Overall, what do you got for the Herd against the Monarchs?
Overall, I'll give them a C+. I mean, clearly wouldn't have been that high if it wasn't for the win, but they got the win, so they get the benefit of the doubt in that regard. I mean, if it would have been a loss, it would have easily been like probably an F. I mean,
yeah, definitely an F.
If you lose 13-6 to Old Dominion, that's an F.
At home?
I mean, terrible. So, but because they made it count when it mattered the most, made the plays late, managed to get the win, send the homecoming crowd home happy, this, that, and the other thing, that I'll give them a C+. But I wrote down C initially, but then I thought any kind of win, I feel like it has to be maybe a little bit more generous than a C, but honestly, you could easily make the case it's a C. But it's a C+ just because they got the win. So
because it's either a C+ game or an F game. There's no in between, and it all hinges on the win or the loss. So look, the Herd is 3-3 now, 1-1 in conference. They've got North Texas, who we'll preview on the other side of this break. But I've got to ask you the main question. I didn't have you last week on the show, so we haven't asked this for a couple of weeks now. What do we know about Marshall after 6 games? other than that they are a 500 ball club, both overall and in conference. What do we know about the Herd?
That question is becoming muddier and muddier.
Isn't it, though? Yeah.
Much. I mean, you think after the first 2 weeks, you think you might be looking at a possible conference juggernaut. Then now you're looking at it and it's like, can this team even get to a bowl game?
Yep.
So you don't know what you have. So what you know is we don't know crap. I mean, but they don't know. They don't know what they are right now. It's like you said earlier. I don't even think they know who they are right now because the defense really has no identity now. I mean, it has been stopping the run, sacks, just manhandling the line of scrimmage, but that's not the case anymore. I mean, they're giving up all kinds of rushing yards to the other teams, and that's concerning. And they certainly don't have an identity in the secondary because they get torched most times, to be honest, or get pass interferences. So you can't really say that. And offensively, their identity this year had been tempo, speed, points, yards. Didn't have that yesterday. I mean, and it doesn't matter. It's like I said to my friends yesterday. I was seeing all the tweets about Marshall's, in weeks past, they're number 4 in the country in total offense. Their number this and their number that. It doesn't matter. Number one, if you don't get the win, and number two, if you're having 3 or 4 turnovers a game, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're not putting up enough points, I mean, the yards don't matter unless you score with it. And I mean, it's common sense. So, what we know right now is not a whole lot. I mean, it just keeps getting muddier and muddier. We know they have a lot of concerns and a lot of issues that they have to work out, but we don't really know what we have with this team. And that's concerning we're halfway through the season. So they better start. If they want to suck, then they need to start sucking. If they want to be good, they better start being good because I don't have a clue right now.
He said, because I don't have time for that. Give me.
This is emotionally draining.
Yeah. So look, here's what I know about the Herd. On offense, I know that having Talik Keaton out of the lineup right now is boding much larger than I thought it was going to initially be. He is proving to be a more key cog in this offensive machine, whether it's through, like I said before, his personal production or what he makes a defense account for. Second, what I also know is that for the life of me, I cannot understand still 4 years into this, why Xavier Gaines is not utilized more. I said this during the game, in a game where every yard mattered yesterday, they did not utilize him. He is a very sure-handed receiver. He will make plays in open space. We know that. I mean, he can run the ball. I mean, we're not seeing any kind of creativity. I don't know if I want to use that term, but we're not seeing the wrinkle. Let's use wrinkles. We're not seeing the jet sweeps with Willie Johnson that we were seeing before. We're not seeing these little outlet passes to Xavier Gaines where he can get you 6 or 7 yards. I mean, take the 6 or 7 freaking yards.
You want an example of that? Yesterday, you don't throw to get to the guy the entire game. Then you finally on third and 10, 3rd and 12, whatever it was, you throw him a 4-yard pass. He makes a guy miss. He gets the freaking first down. I'm thinking, here's a crazy idea. Get that guy the ball more.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you out here doing? Cramsey has not known how. I swear he has not known how to use Xavier Gaines since he's been here. He hasn't. They tried that 1 year when they split him all over the field, and that was pretty good stuff there. But even then, they didn't get him the ball enough. And I said to my friend yesterday, if Xavier Gaines was on my team for the last 4 years, he'd be my leading receiver every single year.
I mean, he'd be up there.
I would throw to him constantly, not to the point where it was like too much, but this guy's always going to be open. I don't care if it's a 5-yard route, 10-yard route, 20 yards, 30 yards. He's going to get space and he's going to catch the ball and he's going to make a play with it. I mean, I just have never, for the life of me, we could do a whole podcast on Xavier Gaines. I mean, his misuse.
Well, I mean, here's the thing that also concerned me. Late in the game, they tried to hit him on a crossing route, and it was an incomplete pass.
Yeah.
And what the announcer said was that Gaines should have, once he cleared the defense, he should have kept running towards the sideline. While I agree with that, he didn't do that. He kind of slowed his route once he cleared the linebackers. But immediately I knew why. It's because a couple of times in the game already, he had done that and the pass was behind him. So if you're thinking, all right, well, it's already happened 2 or 3 times already, this pass is probably going to be behind me. And it wasn't. So it wasn't a completed pass either. But still, that is definitely something I know. I know that Xavier Gaines needs to be targeted more. He needs to be utilized more. And he can pick you up more first downs in a game. He can keep the chains moving for you more times in a game. Defensively, I don't know what Marshall is. I'm convinced that they don't know what they are either. Are they going to be this, pin their ears back pass rushing team that wants to just annihilate the quarterback? Yeah, every team wants to be that. But can you do it? Well, they've shown they can, and they've also shown they can't. I don't know what's happening with the running lanes, why they're being opened up all of a sudden. What has changed from week 1 and 2 and 3 to now? I mean, Marshall did a great job of shutting down Cam Peoples against App State, but then their backup came in and had a killer game. I didn't even touch on that earlier. So we've seen a lot of running backs put up some big numbers against this Marshall defense. It's something it's got to get fixed because it was working and now it's not working. So tell me what has changed. But overall, I think the Herd they've just got to get it together. I mean, we can't be learning on the fly anymore. You've got to know who you are, and you've got to be that. If you're going to be a tempo offense, then your tempo offense has to work. And if it doesn't work, you better figure out what you need to be. Any last words before we go to break and start to preview North Texas?
Well, there was a couple of things I was thinking about mentioning that I didn't, but I'll just probably settle on the one instance for now. So we were talking yesterday during the game about a certain play that was made through the secondary. It was Micah Abraham. And I said, in my opinion, this was the best one-on-one coverage play the secondary has made all year. And I don't remember or know if you remember it or not, but it was in the second half. Old Dominion was driving the ball. It was a pretty deep pass. And immediately you think, well, face guard and pray, they're going to get an interference call on him. Mike Abraham was stride for stride with his guy. He was looking at the ball. He jumped up he almost jumped. He went up the other guy's backside, swatted the ball down, made an absolute awesome play on that ball. I mean, and I was saying that is great coverage. That is exactly how it should be done right there. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I know that stood out to me and the people, and it seemed like the crowd even kind of reacted to it because they're used to seeing it go wrong in that instance. But that was a phenomenal play. And I mean, I'm not sure if it's going to, lead to anything more for the secondary as far as that goes, but that's the play that you need to model your game after right there if you're in the secondary.
Yeah, I do remember that play actually, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, that is a phenomenally great defensive play from a defensive back for this Herd team, because you're right, more often than not we see a flag thrown or we just see the guys face guard and pray, and we see how it's played out. But anyway, North Texas looms, Trace. The dreaded trip to the state of Texas for the Herd is on the horizon. Stick with us. On the other side of this break, we're going to preview the trip for the Herd to Denton, Texas. It's a Moonshine Third Down podcast.
And Wells stepping up, going long, has a man down there. Willie Johnson got it. Touchdown, Marshall. A 52-yard prayer. And they're an extra point away from tying it.
It's North Texas week, Trace. The Herd's got to go to Denton, Texas, the dreaded trip to the state of Texas, where the Herd is something like 2-12 all time or something like that, to face North Texas, a team that had some hype coming into the season, and I don't know what to think about them, really. They're not doing too well. They're 1-4 on the season, 0-2 in conference. But they've lost to some pretty decent teams. Power Index likes the Herd in a fairly big way on a road game. 67.8% chance to win for the Herd. We're recording so early. It's Sunday right now, so there's no line on the game right now, no over-under, so we can't talk about any of that stuff. The game, of course, is going down October 15th, 7 p.m. Game will be on CBS Sports Network. The Herd in North Texas. All time, the Herd owns a 2-1 advantage over North Texas, but in the Conference USA era, they're split. The first meeting was back in 1988, way back when. The Herd has never won a game in Denton, Texas, as you probably are not shocked by learning. North Texas beat the Herd in that woeful 2016 season, but the Herd beat North Texas the year before in 2015. So both teams are holding serve at home. I mentioned North Texas is 1-4 on the season. Their losses are to some good teams: SMU, UAB, Louisiana Tech, and Missouri. So if you're going to lose, at least it's not like a Middle Tennessee on the slate, in your loss column. I mean, no offense, but these are all pretty good teams. This is one of the last 2 games remaining for the Herd as what I would categorize as get-it-right games, like you said. They've got to get it right. They've got North Texas. They've got FIU. Both those could be categorized right now as get-it-right games for the Herd, and then they start the gauntlet in November. What do you think about the trip to Texas based on what we just saw the Herd do against Old Dominion?
Well, it certainly leads to some weary thoughts. I mean, even if Marshall had blown out Old Dominion, you still got to be a little wary just because they're always, their reputation of playing in Texas isn't very good for a good reason, because they play like dog crap most of the time when they're in Texas. So, I mean, they did win 2 years ago though at Rice and in the state of Texas, but that was Rice, and that wasn't really that big of a deal. But like, they did win 2 years ago in the state of Texas. But this North Texas team is interesting because, like, you look at their record and it looks bad, and the record is not much clearly, but like you said, they played some quality opponents and they put up some decent games against those teams. They put up a pretty decent effort against Missouri yesterday, and they played some teams tough. So they're not, put it this way, I think they're better than Old Dominion. It's so by that metric, Marshall's got to play a lot better than they just played, or they ain't going to win this game. So, and it's on the road, so that's always a tough one, especially when you're going all the way out there to Texas. I mean, that's a long trip. It's always tough on a team coming from the East Coast, East Coast. The time zone over here compared to the time zone there is totally different. So, it's a tough trip. Marshall's got to get something figured out here. They can't keep playing the way they've been playing. Interceptions got to stop. Run defense has to get better. There's a lot of things that have to go right in this one, but discipline has to get better as well. So there's a lot they need to work on, and it needs to be worked on pretty quickly because you got a short week. This is a Friday night game, so you got a shorter week to get ready for it too. So, they better get it figured out, because if you drop this game, well, FIU should be a win at home, but you can't guarantee that either. But if you drop this game, you're under 500 with a really tough schedule still to come. So they better get this win and get over 500 before those games.
Yeah, they need some road wins. They got the road win against Navy, but they're not gonna. You can't just win your home slate and expect everything to be okay. You have to be a team that goes and wins on the road. And they all say it's been said for years that defense travels. So the Herd's going to need this defense to travel. They're going to need some semblance of offense to travel as well. North Texas can put up some yardage, but they also give up a lot of yardage. And we'll get into that here in a minute. They're on their backup quarterback, which was their starting quarterback last year. He was not the starter in week 1 and 2, but he is now. So, let's just talk about some of these players to look out for, since I've got to lead into a quarterback. And that's number 2 quarterback, Austin. I don't know how you say it. Is it On? Austin On, Aune? I don't know, man. I'm not a North Texas fan. Whatever. 6'2", 216-pound junior. 40 out of 83 on the season for 518 yards, 5 touchdowns versus 2 interceptions, but he's been sacked 6 times only in 3 games. Like I said, he wasn't playing in the first couple of weeks. He just came in the final 3 weeks. But along with that, in just 3 weeks, he's also the second leading rusher on the team, 31 carries for just 119 yards, though. So what's that tell you? They don't run the ball that great. They don't have a superstar running back, but the leading rusher on the team, number 3 running back, DeAndre Torrey, 5'7", 195-pound senior, 115 carries for 601 yards, 4 touchdowns on the ground, good for 5.2 yards per carry. Number 14, wide receiver Roderick Burns, a 5'10", 179-pound junior, leads the North Texas in receptions, yardage, and tied for the team lead with touchdowns. 30 receptions, 363 yards, 2 touchdowns, 12.1 yards per catch average. And number 88, they utilized the tight end, Jason. Golly, what is that? I can't even read my own writing. I think it's Pirtle, Pirtle. I have terrible handwriting sometimes. 6'2", 232-pound senior, 15 catches, 138 yards, 1 touchdown. Good for 9.2 yards per carry. All in all, the North Texas offense is putting up 415 yards per game, 212 through the air and 203 on the ground. So they do run the ball on a per-game average pretty well. It's just like, it's kind of crazy to me that your backup quarterback, which is your former starting quarterback, is your second leading rusher, and he's got 119 yards. That's kind of wild. Scoring 22.8 points per game. The Herd allows 22.8 points per game. So if that's not a mirror image of one another, I don't know what is. So offensively, what are you worried about? What are you thinking we're going to see this Herd defense do? Let's see. Which Herd defense will show up? Let's put it that way. You're making the long trip to Texas. You've seen a team that's been gashed a little bit on the ground the past month-ish, maybe a little less, and you're facing a team that runs the ball pretty well. What do you think we're going to see as far as the matchup goes?
Well, that's the big concerning factor, is the fact that North Texas has ran the ball pretty well, and Marshall's one of the worst in FBS in rushing yards allowed per game. So that something's going to have to change there. It's one strength against one weakness. It's going to come to a head here, and Marshall has to come out in the better than North Texas in that category, because especially when you're on the road that far of a trip, in a short week, you might not be. It'd be easier for you to get kind of worn down and gashed on the ground in a game like that, but they have struggled. I mean, Middle Tennessee ran on them, Old Dominion ran on them, App State's backup ran a whole over them. So I mean, they have struggled on the ground. I mean, they have to get that. They have to get that shirt up, and that's pretty much a little spoiler. That's pretty much one of my points to victory. And I think that needs to be the case, because I don't think North Texas is a team that's going to really go out there and light you up through the air. I think it's kind of like Old Dominion was. They can make some throws and make some plays, but that's not going to be their bread and butter. They're going to try to beat you more on the ground. And Mason Fine's not here anymore, so they can't throw the ball as well as they used to. So it's a change. It's a different offense now for North Texas, but what they're good at, Marshall has struggled against. So, you got to look for that matchup.
Yeah, you mentioned the Herd's pretty porous on the ground. They're giving up 210 yards a game on the ground. So it is strength against weakness right now. So, if you're a North Texas fan, you're thinking that's what we do to win. We run the ball and force Marshall to stop us. Defensively, for North Texas, in a change of trend from what we've usually previewed, lots of linebackers leading the way on this defense instead of a bunch of players in the secondary. Linebacker KD Davis, 46 tackles, leads the team, 28 solo, 2 sacks, and 1 fumble recovery. Linebacker Tyreek Davis, 31 tackles, 20 solo, 1 sack, and 1 forced fumble. You're going to see a theme here, Trace. Linebacker Kevin Wood, 26 tackles, 15 solo, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. And then a defensive back, Mikhail Sanders, 26 tackles, 18 solo, 2 passes defended, a forced fumble, and an interception. And then linebacker Larry Nixon, the third, 20 tackles, 16 solo. 4 out of 5 your leading tacklers are linebackers. 4 out of your 5 leading defensive guys have multiple impact plays. I mean, this is a different type of defense than Marshall has faced, especially in those type of plays. I did mention that North Texas will give up yardage, and they do. 424 yards per game allowed, 214 through the air, 210 on the ground, and they're allowing 32.2 points per game. They're really good at impact plays, but they're really good at giving up points too. Marshall, by the way, scoring 34.8 points per game on average, but most recently only 20 points against Old Dominion. So take that for what it's worth. Now, I mentioned those impact plays. This is something that North Texas is really, really good at, and this is something that should scare you a little bit if you're a Herd fan, because we know Marshall's prone to turning the ball over. As a team, this North Texas defense has 10 sacks, which isn't that great through 5 games, but 9 forced fumbles, 6 fumble recoveries, and 3 interceptions. That will win you some games against a team, especially that likes to cough the ball up a time or two, is prone to throwing an interception a time or two. So something to keep your eye on if you're a Herd fan. Now, special teams wise, if this game gets into be a nail biter and it turns into a game you got to rely on the kicker to make a big kick, I think North Texas likes what they have. Ethan Mooney, the kicker for North Texas, 6 of 7 on field goals this year with a long of 48, perfect on extra points, 12 of 12, and his only miss was from a 50-plus yard kick. So anything basically 49 down, he's money in the bank. So how do you think this Herd offense is going to attack this North Texas defense? I mean, what do you think they do? Do you think they trust Grant Wells to run a more tempo offense, or is this a game where we may see a transition to a more run heavy Herd offense because of the yardage that North Texas allows on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can shy away from what you want to do, too much, because it's kind of like the philosophy that Dan D'Antoni has in basketball. It's like, he wants you to shoot threes, and like if you get in a cold streak, your cold spell where you might miss a bunch of threes in a row, he wants you to keep shooting. I mean, that's his mindset, and I'm sure that's the same mindset Huff has with Grant Wells. He might miss some throws. He might throw a pick or here or 2 picks or whatever, but he wants you to keep playing. He wants you to fight through it. And I don't think you can shy away too far from that. I mean, North Texas defense is not very good. I mean, from what it looks like, now they have played a pretty tough schedule, but it leaves a lot to be desired, I would imagine, if you're a North Texas fan. So if Marshall can just execute and get out of their own way, then they should be able to do a lot in this game offensively. I mean, I think on the ground and through the air, they should be able to have a good day. But it's all about execution. It's all about playing smart, and that's really where it starts. So if Marshall can just do that, I don't think they'll have any problems moving the ball in this one.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you shy away from utilizing Grant Wells, as an up-tempo passer. I get the more feeling like both these teams are allowing 210 yards on the ground. So I lean towards, like, if Rasheen Ali is ripping off 6 and 7 yards a carry, and Sheldon Evans is, when he needs a breather, Evans is coming in and getting you 4 and 5 yards a carry, you really don't have a pressing need to be passing the ball a whole lot. You might as well just save that. And, but of course, the caveat to that caveat is if you're putting the ball on the ground, then you're going to be forced to pass a lot. So ultimately, what do you think the Herd's got to do to get a win against North Texas on the road it's basically a must-win game. I think all of them are must-win at this point. So what do you think the Herd's got to do to get a win?
Yeah, first thing I wrote down, and I just said this a minute ago, play smart. I mean, that's the first thing I wrote down is you got to play smarter. I mean, as far as that goes, this last game against Old Dominion was by far the worst all year in that category. I mean, they just played so undisciplined, just not smart, dumb football. That's what they did. And it about cost them the game. So you can't have that happen again. You can't have the unsportsmanlike conducts or the turnovers as well. That goes into it too. You can't have the turnovers. You can't have the silly penalties. You can't have 50-yard pass plays getting called back. You can't have that. You can't have an extra 15 yards tacked onto a kickoff that you already weren't great on, in the first place. You can't have that. Got to play as smart as you can possibly play. I mean, will there be boneheaded plays made? I'm sure there will be. I mean, it's college football. They're college athletes. I mean, from time to time, that's going to happen. but you can't have as many as they had against Old Dominion and expect to win many games. So that's the first thing I wrote down. Second point I wrote down is they have to finish in the red zone, because they did not do a very good job of that against Old Dominion. They haven't really been doing a great job of that all year. They did finish well in the red zone against Navy first game, because they got down there and then Ali was able to punch it in 4 times. But most of the games this year, they have struggled in the red zone. East Carolina, Gamage fumbles at the goal line. This last game, they had to settle for, or Appalachian State, they got to settle for field goals. This last game against Old Dominion, they got to settle for 2 field goals, a couple interceptions here and there. I mean, you got to be able to finish. Once Marshall, they can move the ball really well when they're not, when there's more field to work with. But when the field starts shrinking and all you have is 10 yards to the end zone, that's when they start struggling. So they have to figure out how to finish better in the red zone, in my opinion. Next point is shore up the run defense. I mean, it's a problem. It's been a problem, especially over the last few games. I mean, you can understand Navy getting a lot of rushing yards because that's all they do, essentially. But teams like, Middle Tennessee and App State and Old Dominion and East Carolina that are running the ball all over you, then you got some concern. I mean, you have to figure out a way to, like you said, I mean, I think there was even a play yesterday where it was 3rd and 14 and they gave it like a 40-yard run. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I mean, they just can't. That's a killer. I mean, when you're in 4th or 3rd and long, or even 3rd and short, and you giving up big chunk runs, that is demoralizing. So you have to figure out a way to, shore it up to an extent. Or do we, as fans, expect it to be like it was last year, or just completely suffocating? No, because I don't think anybody believes it's going to ever be that again this year. But you have to figure out a way to make it as good as you can make it. I mean, that goes without saying. Then my last point is, forget where you're playing. I mean, you're in Texas. Everybody, they're going to hear it all week, I'm sure, through media, through social media, through paper, whatever. Marshall struggles in the state of Texas. That they know that. It's on the road, no less. That's hard enough as it is, but it's on the road in the state of Texas where Marshall struggles. Just forget where you're playing. I mean, you play the game the same way, whether you're home or away or neutral or wherever. You play the game the same way. Just play it. I mean, just forget about where you are. Forget that you're in a state where Marshall historically struggles. I mean, you just got to go with it. You just got to go with it and play as well as you can play, and see and let the chips fall where they may. I mean, that's really all it comes down to.
I think it's an excellent opportunity, actually, for this team to go into Texas and get a win and kind of quiet that kind of stuff, because they've historically struggled. This is a great opportunity to go in there and go, well, this ain't that type of team. We're a team that's, going to play hard no matter if we're an hour from home or 13 hours from home, whatever. But look, number one key to victory for me for the Herd is no turnovers. You can't do that. You cannot do it. Just eliminate it. Make smarter decisions. There's no need to throw into triple coverage. Somebody's probably open. If 3 guys are on 1 guy, somebody's probably open somewhere. Find that guy. Number 2, hey, how about we start taking what we can get, right? 7 yards, take it. 25 yards, wide open, take it. Whatever you can get, just take it. Keep the chain moving. Keep the North Texas offense standing on the sideline. How about on defense, we play a bend, don't break style. Like, they're going to get yardage. They're going to move the ball. They're going to get first downs. There's going to be a demoralizing 3rd down that gets picked up in the game. That's just football. But if Marshall can force North Texas into taking field goal attempts versus finding the end zone, it's going to be huge, especially if we see a little bit of a hangover from Old Dominion offensively, and there's just not a lot of points to be had for Marshall. Forcing field goals for North Texas is going to be huge. Number 4, you said it, and I'm going to say it too. You've got to stop killing yourself with the penalties. Please. We are 6 games, going to be 7 games into this season. We got to get lined up the right way. We got to see everybody where they're supposed to be. Miscommunications are going to happen. But look, I'm not going to tell these kids that they can't celebrate a big play, because they should. It's an emotional game, and you should play with that type of emotion. But we know now that these referees are really quick to throw a taunting flag or an unsportsmanlike conduct flag. If anything can potentially be viewed as that type of thing, you got to think that it's going to be viewed that way. You can't hope that it won't be. So if you're jacked up and pumped that you just made a big interception, got a huge return, that's great. Find the closest dude with an M on his helmet and celebrate with that guy real fast. Just don't take the chance. Just don't spike the ball. Don't do it. Go have fun with your teammate. But let's put ourselves in a position to have a big play called back. We do those things, and I think we can see Marshall, quiet those Texas bugaboo birds, whatever you want to call them again. Maybe they can just sneak out of there with a win, or maybe they can get a convincing win. All that said, Trace, who's your 200-proof player against North Texas?
Yeah, I'm going to roll with Corey Gamage in this one. I feel like that's the guy that they want to be the number one receiver, that he's treated as the number one receiver, but he's not quite ready. He's not quite taken the reins yet. That's kind of how I view Corey Gamage. Like, he should be, and he, could be the number one receiver easily. And like, he's that caliber of talent, but he has to step up and take it. And this will be a big point right here to do it on the road in Texas. You're sitting at 500, you're wanting to turn it around, get it going again. Corey Gamage needs to have a big game here. And, that's pretty much number one guy Grant Wells looks for from game to game. And you want to see him start. And that's what I think on the call-in show yesterday on 93.7 afterwards, somebody said, Marshall has always had essentially that number one receiver. Troy Brown or Randy Moss or Darius Watts or Josh Davis or Tyree Brady or Aaron Dobson, whoever. Everybody essentially has had that go-to guy. And Gamage needs to really step up and be that guy. If that's who they're throwing to as many times as they throw it to him, he's got to be that guy. So I'm going with him.
That's a good pick. And to that end, I would say that he's got all the tools to do that. And we saw a big play yesterday called back on an offensive pass interference. And he's a big guy. So
I thought
you
that
can't.
was questionable.
I did not. From the television, it was not. He legitimately pushed away from the defender. But that's what I'm trying to say, is that he's so big. Those type of plays against a smaller corner are going to get magnified just because you're so big. It's like Shaq pushing off on somebody. It looks worse than it is just because of your stature. But he's got all the tools. He's got all the physical measurables that you want to be that guy. And I think you're right. He just needs to finally just be the daggone guy. My 200 proof player this week is going to be Rasheen Ali. Down game against Old Dominion. Didn't find the end zone. Didn't have any big long runs. And I like to think that that's going to change this week because North Texas isn't very good at stopping the run. And Rasheen Ali is very tough at, bringing down after he gets past the initial tackler. Even if he gets hit, he's still really good at racking up yards after contact. But he didn't have, the big breakaway run yesterday. He had a long of 11 yards, which is very uncharacteristic for Rasheen Ali. So I like him in a bounce-back game on the road where, a porous defense awaits Marshall's run game. What's your score prediction, Trace?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in this one, but I'm saying Marshall gets the win 31-28. I don't feel great until they prove me otherwise. I don't feel great about picking Marshall, really, especially in a game like this on the road, long distance travel, short week, all that kind of thing. But I think that Marshall should win this game, but Marshall should be 6-0, and they're not. So, what I'm saying? Like, you can't should haves and, they whatever, that's getting old real quick. So they have to go out and just do it. And, they got lucky against Old Dominion. They did. They got lucky. And, I don't think you can't afford to play that badly for that long and then pull it out in the last minute. You can't afford to do that in this one. So Marshall's got to get it done. I don't have a whole lot of confidence with the pick, but I think Marshall is, from top to bottom, is the better football team here. Whether they play like it is a totally different scenario in its own right, but I think they're the better team, so I'm going to pick them. But I don't have a whole lot of faith in it at this point.
I don't either. And given the fact that I think you have to score 30 points really to have a legitimate shot to get a win in this conference, even though we just saw Marshall win by scoring 20, I'm picking the Herd 34-31. I don't feel good about them going over 40 points for the foreseeable future until they gain a legitimate identity. But, there's a lot of underperformance going on in Denton, Texas as well. There's a lot of hot seat chatter going on for their head coach. There's a lot of, upset fans who thought that they would be in contention, rivaling UAB and UTSA in the West this year, and it just isn't that. So I like the Herd to get it done, but I'm like you, I don't feel really good about it. But you got to have this one. I mean, you got to win against North Texas. You've got to win against the FIU. So, your season now is on the brink a few weeks earlier than it would have potentially been otherwise. If Marshall drops this one, they can pretty much give up any hope of making it to a Conference USA title game.
No chance.
I think that they would be reduced to playing spoiler for other teams.
Yeah.
And, you're playing for more than just pride at that point. You're playing like, well, let's keep Florida Atlantic out of a title game. Let's play to keep Western Kentucky out of a title game. That's what you're going to be doing. And that's not where you want to be in mid-October. Final thoughts, Trace. What do you got before we get out of here?
Oh, interesting time right now for the Herd. I mean, happy they got the win. Happy for the team. They needed to get the win. They needed to see their hard work pay off, in the win column. That can't be understated. Will it lead to a string of wins in a row and East Division title hopes? Who knows? I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's where it's headed just because they're playing so erratically, but you never know. I mean, a flick, the switch can be flipped. I mean, it just depends on how they play from here on out. I mean, it was good to get the win on homecoming, a big weekend in Huntington with the new, the statue getting unveiled, Hal Greer going on, and the homecoming festivities and honoring the 96 team and everything. It's good to you got to get a win for all that, especially given all the circumstances and homecoming. So good win there. They need to get the win here against North Texas. I mean, if you can get this win, then you have a lot more confidence. You got 2 in a row. You're back home against another subpar team. So that could be 3 in a row. So they have a lot of – there's still hope, put it that way. But, man, oh, man, they have to figure it out real fast.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would like to think that there may have been a little bit of a air of distraction around the program this week with some news that broke off the field circumstances, which, of course, we're not going to get into. If you know. If you're following the news, So let's hope that was, floating around the building and helped lead to this subpar performance. But even in a subpar performance, Marshall was able to get the win against Old Dominion. Now they got to move past all that and focus on North Texas. For all it's worth, I think with all the variables surrounding this game and who's underperforming and who's doing well and all that, I think this is going to ultimately be a matchup of 2 even teams given the circumstances, right? If this game was in Huntington, I would feel a little bit different. But being that the Herd's got to travel, both teams are underperforming to a certain degree at this point. I think this is a fairly even measuring stick of, 2 teams, even though only one team's got 1 win and the other one's a 500 ball club. They're both kind of, North Texas is probably just a few plays here and there from being 500 as well. It's just like we're talking about the Herd's a few plays from being 5-1 or 6-0. Well, I mean, North Texas is probably a few plays away from having a winning record as well. But at the end of the day, you got to go take care of business. You can't be a championship team if you can't win on the road, period. So there's no time like the present. Go to Denton, Texas, get a win, head back to Huntington, get prepped for FIU before November hits. Trace, we got to go. It's nice to get a win, but let's take us out of here.
Go Herds.
Go Tops. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. We'll see you later in the week with Steven and I bring you a UTSA recap, and I'm going to have to look at the schedule. I can't remember who they got coming up. But anyway, we'll get you that coming up later in the week. It's the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast. Later.